jokes or pranks on everyone. But really, yeah, like Andrea said, the hope is that this is going to be a pretty casual event. And if there are any questions or things that you'd like repeated or just clarified, please do jump in at any time. We'll definitely have a question session at the end, but yeah, at any point, feel free to just raise your hand and ask any questions. So quickly jumping in. Again, this is advertising beyond Facebook. The point and the hope here is that I can provide some suggestions on for small businesses that are currently using Facebook, and they're just ready to try something else and take that next step into digital advertising. So a quick about me. My name is Stu. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, a graduate of Indiana University. My past experiences included roles at Expedia and various ad agencies in New York. I had a favorite celebrity encounter of John Cho and Cal Penn right when they were filming Harold and Kumar, which was one of my favorite movies growing up. My wife is a teacher at Graham Hill in South Seattle, and my favorite games, euchre, being from the Midwest, chess, and Ticket to Ride. So just a little quick tidbit there. So jumping right in. So Facebook has its benefits, right? I'm not here to tell you that Facebook isn't a great tool and platform for businesses of all sizes, because it is. It's easy. You know, I think that if my mom wanted to set up a campaign today, she probably could. It might not be the most successful one, but she could get something live up and running. You can drive traffic directly to your site. Not every tool allows that ability, right? On Amazon, if you're advertising on their portal, there are expectations and only certain times that you're allowed to drive traffic directly to your website. With Facebook, that's not an issue. You can use deterministic data. Deterministic data being, you know it being true. You know it because you're able to track it, as opposed to probabilistic data where it's probably true, right? I look up dog treats all the time. I probably have a dog, versus I go to the dog kennel website to watch my dog at daycare, right? Those are two different types of data, and you're able to target on that deterministic data, and it's very accurate. The nice thing about Facebook data is 90% of the time people are offering that data voluntarily, so you know it's pretty up to date, you know it's pretty accurate, you know it's trends that people care about. But most important, the performance is measurable, right? There's a dashboard that tells you what's working, what's not, what needs to be changed, what's driving traffic, and the actual costs associated with it. So it's, you know, like I said, it's a very powerful tool, and it shouldn't be discounted as that. Any questions or anything that doesn't make sense so far? Perfect. So, you know, with any tool, Facebook also has its challenges. Most importantly, right, it's losing its audience share. The younger generations, people my age, people below, even probably a little older, they're quickly going away from Facebook. They're finding new platforms, most of which have their own ability to target as well. But you know, again, it's that fragmentation of, do we want to have to go to each different platform to find the ability to advertise and reach that audience? Especially lately, we've seen brand safety become a huge concern with Facebook. You just never know what your ad might appear next to, right? Whether it be a conversation of people arguing, somebody posting something that you might not agree with. There's really a lot of options for your business or your brand to appear next to something that is less than stellar. The ability to customize your ads and your targeting and the tools, it's pretty limited. This gets especially concerning as you start to increase your budgets and start to become more sophisticated in your digital advertising. There isn't as much options that you can do outside of just your general campaigns. A lot of times you'll even need an API to get better access, but you know, it is definitely a challenge. And you know, we call it an attribution hog. It tends to take credit for for all conversions. In the past, or a lot of people might leave Facebook open on their browser, and anything they're doing, Facebook is gonna track that, and they're gonna take credit for it, whether or not you actually saw your ad or whether or not your ad is actually on the page. There are ways to limit that exposure, but ultimately in the industry, it is known as just an attribution hog that tends to take credit for or over credit for ads that aren't necessarily 100% their responsibility. IDFA, people who are paying attention have seen this term pop up. IDFA is the Apple ID for advertisers. So basically, the iPhone used to offer a unique identification number that you could use to track conversions or a user across devices. If you've updated your iPhone in the past week or so, this is no longer an option. And while this definitely will impact most advertisers and most types of digital advertising, Facebook was especially vocal about their resistance to this because it impacts a lot of what they do. And then kind of circling back on just brand safety in general, Facebook's algorithms don't necessarily favor brands and favor good content. It favors controversy because that's what keeps people on the site. And as a result, it's likely that your ad and your brand is likely going to be associated with some form of controversy just being on the site. So yeah, kind of some of the negatives there. Any questions or any comments on that?
Where are people moving away from if they're not on Facebook?
Yeah, well, great question, and a perfect segue into what we have next. So while this isn't necessarily where people would be moving away, it's definitely an option, right? The Facebook audience, as it gets older and the younger generations are looking for something new, they're moving to different platforms, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever. And like I said, each one has their own tool that allows you to advertise on their site. But when you have small budgets and when you have limited resources, it generally doesn't make sense to go to one source or one website to advertise on because you're stuck with what that audience has, with what those ads offer. So the option is to go advertise on the internet, advertise more broadly, use the tools available to target your audience, not necessarily a website. And that's when a DSP or a demand side platform is going to be a very valuable tool for you. So in its most simple form, a DSP or demand side platform is a tool that enables the purchase of online ad inventory. The definitions are pretty endless, right? A lot of people could say Facebook is a DSP, Google Ads is a DSP, but I think, in my opinion, the main differentiator of what a DSP and a standard ad manager is the ability to buy across different websites and across different inventory. So what makes this a little more clear is with Amazon and Google, they have their Google Ads product or their Amazon Ads product, but then they also offer different products, Amazon DSP or Google DV360, that allows you to use the data that those platforms offer to buy agnostically across the internet. And with that, it gives you just a really powerful tool and the ability to advertise, like I said, across any website, anytime, any place, and as a result, really find your audience. The key to DSP and programmatic buying, like I said, you're no longer buying a website, a time or a place, you're buying your audience. So you're buying those users who you think are valuable to your customer or to your product, to your business, and you're targeting them throughout their user journey. And like any other tool that makes its progress into the ecosystem. The options and the amount of products that are available here are pretty endless. So I can't necessarily say like, hey, this is the best one for your business, because again, each tool offers so much for any specific business that it's really going to be the ability to cater towards your business is going to be endless here. So are there any questions or anything that doesn't make sense here?
Stu, can I just back up for a second? When we had a member, Crystalline K, ask about just what do you mean when you're talking about favoring controversy on Facebook? If you could just offer a little clarity. Are you talking about like negative engagement, like trolling, like, or comments on ads? Or I guess curious what that means when you talk about favoring controversy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's exactly that. So the Facebook algorithms are built to increase engagement. So comments are, a very engaging, like task on Facebook. So those comments, whether they be negative, whether they be positive, they're going to get promoted. They're going to show up more often. Negative comments, trolling, they tend to show up more often because people tend to respond to negative comments. And it's that cycle of the more people see it, the more people respond, the more people respond, the more people see it. So it becomes that that double-edged sword of like negativity where, because people are responding, more people are going to see it. And the more people see it, the more people are going to respond. So it just amplifies that negativity, as opposed to exactly the feedback loop. And it's not always necessarily the best feedback loop. So yeah, great question though.
Thank you. And then I'm assuming when we were talking about DSP, you will give some examples further on in your presentation or links where people can find details on that.
Yeah, so I can definitely provide some of my suggestions, but really there are so many different names and types, pretty common names that like of businesses that So Google and the Trade Desk, for instance, are two of the best known DSPs. The challenges with a DSP like those are the minimum budgets that are going to be required are pretty severe, and basically impossible for most businesses. But as you can imagine, they offer the most sophistication, the most options, the best margins. But again, the minimum budget for a tool like that is going to be pretty severe. Same with Amazon. But me personally, I'm using a tool called Choozle, which is a byproduct of the Trade Desk. And it's, I like to say it's an advanced entry-level tool because it gives me a lot of the sophistication and a lot of the options that the larger DSPs do, but it eliminates the need for those $1 million monthly budgets that today it's just not something that we have that option for.
Hi, Stu. This is Eddie from NORPAC. I had a question. Does ad roll fall into that category of DSP?
Yeah.
DSP? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it does. So ad roll is a great example, and from my understanding of and my familiarity with them is they tend to be a video first DSP. So they give you the option and provide access to video inventory across the inventory. So ad roll is a great example of a DSP, and it's just like I said, one of many. So just like Facebook or just like any other tool, there's a lot of pros of buying with the DSP, and there are some cons as well. Kind of summing up just the basic pros and what makes this tool so powerful: efficiency, data, and cost, right? It is by far one of the most efficient ways to buy media. You can buy across multiple publishers without having to sign multiple IOs, without having to go to each individual publisher and make sure that your specs align, without having to make sure that you are negotiating with multiple stakeholders. So it's a really good way, especially for those advertisers with smaller budgets to access multiple different websites without having to have those multiple conversations. You can have one conversation with your account manager, or even do it yourself if you're a self-service DSP manager, and you can buy across 90% of the websites on the internet with the simple click of a button. Data, just like Facebook offers really valuable data, DSPs gives you the option of using tons of different data. So whether it be purchasing third-party data that has been aggregated for you, and that you can pay at a fee, sharing data with one of your business counterparts, or using your own retargeting data or CRM data. The options are really unlimited, and it gives you a really powerful way to target at the most specific levels, right? If I wanted to target somebody who visited, my brick and mortar store in South Seattle on a Tuesday, in theory, that is something that I can do with the DSP. Not always feasible, depending on the sizes and the amount of traffic you would get, but it is a capability that you're able to do. Efficiency, like I said, it helps you avoid the waste of hoping that your audience is seeing it, right? In a traditional TV commercial, you buy an ad on the nightly news, knowing that the general audience who watches that news tends to be your demographic, right? With DSP buying, you know with most certainty that this audience is who you want it to be, because you have those triggers. And then again, the most important thing that ties this all in together is your costs. You get affordable clicks. You can set the max CPM that you're willing to pay for buyers, which helps keep your overall cost down. And you're able to make these efficient optimizations at scale. So you can do it with a click of a button. You can make multiple changes at once. But then, it wouldn't be fair to talk about all the positives without going through the negatives. It is a pretty complex tool, right? For somebody to pick up and just do it themselves, it can be challenging, right? Could you do it? Sure. Are you going to make the most efficient campaign your first time around? Probably not. That's why my suggestion is to use a partner who is trained and an expert, or test out the managed service options. Third-party fees can take a significant chunk of your budget. By the time you use data partners, by the time you have a managed service, by the time you set up private marketplaces to ensure that you are on those sites that you want to be on, almost 40% of your media can go to fees at that point. Barrier to entry, right? Depending on the tools you want to use and the products you want, the cost can be pretty high. To get a standard DSP campaign running, we recommend about $1,000 per month. But to get a lot of the advanced tools and a lot of the targeting to get the most out of it, right? You could be running $10,000, $15,000 a month and still be limited in what you can do. Just like with any ecosystem, potential for ad fraud, it's a concern in the industry, because you're buying across different websites, not of all which you generally know before the campaign starts. Bad actors are there. They are setting up faulty websites, impression, like click fraud. All these things are just part of the advertising ecosystem, but they tend to exist in programmatic because you're buying outside of a single source and ecosystem. And then, the ad rolls of the world tend to be a video first DSP. And with that, every DSP has its own set of capabilities. So there's not one size fits all. So as a result, it makes it challenging to determine which DSP and which tool is going to be the DSP that's going to fit your business needs. What makes the most sense for you, and what tool is going to offer enough, right? So yeah, I think, you know, with that, knowing your, I guess we can jump into the next slide there, because basically, you know, how do you find a programmatic partner? How do you find a DSP? Knowing your budget is going to be the most important thing up front, and knowing your goals, right? If you are very specific, if you are only going to run video, a tool like AdRoll is probably going to be pretty powerful. If you're only going to be running mobile ads and looking for users who are trying to download your mobile app, there are mobile specific DSPs, like the Run DSP, for instance, that can be very suited for that. If you're looking at very local, the DSP Centro could be a very good tool for you. So knowing your budgets, knowing your goals, and knowing what type of inventory are really important when you're just deciding, hey, is this even right for me? And then self or managed service, you know, that's an important one, because not everybody wants to run their own advertising campaigns, but the cost and the opportunity associated with it gives you a pretty severe discount to do so. So the barrier to entry and the cost of running a self-service campaign is much easier and much lower than a managed service model. And the commission that the tool is going to take is going to be, you know, generally 40 to 50% for a managed service, and minimum spends of about 15K to get started should you choose the managed service route. So as you can see, that isn't an option for every advertiser. And then with that, right, just understanding the fees and costs associated. It might sound good on paper, but understand, what are the data costs associated? What are the costs to making sure that I'm geo-targeted to South Seattle, that I'm running on the specific sites that I want to? How important are those to my actual business? So knowing the costs and knowing the fees of the type of inventory you're running on all play into, hey, what are my goals and what am I ultimately trying to get out of this?
Stu, I'm curious, if someone, you know, created a worksheet and were able to answer all these questions, is this something that you could then help them say, these are the best DSPs for you, and this is what it would look like if you self-manage, and this is what it would look like if you supported management?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, I think even like a worksheet's probably a little vague. I mean, I think this is the type of thing that is better suited for just a quick conversation and a quick consultation of, you know, what is your business? What is it? What are you looking for? Right. But yeah, I mean, I think if you had 5 or 6 things that you wanted to write down and shoot my way, I'd be happy to respond and give you some tips and suggestions, or even just have a quick call and discuss it in detail.
That's great, because my sense is a lot of businesses probably know these things, but then when they have this information, it's like, how do I then find the DSP that actually matches all these things? Like, that could be a whole nother load of research to do. So having the knowledge from you would be really valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of what makes it a powerful but challenging tool, is because while you can get started fairly easy, the options and just the different ins and outs of the platforms can be a little overwhelming when you start. So yeah, absolutely, it makes total sense and like I said, it definitely makes sense to have a partner that you're, you know, whether you're working with an agency or whether you're you have somebody on your team that's going to run it themselves. It makes sense for them to spend some time before and have these conversations, because this, while it's made specifically for a programmatic partner, it should be kind of the core to any advertising campaign. It's, you know, what these aren't just specific to programmatic. It's basically like kind of the long and short of it is this should be a cheat sheet for any advertising campaign that goes live, whether it be Facebook, whether you're signing an IO with, Expedia or Travelocity, right? You should have these things in your back pocket either way.
Thanks. So just thought I'd open it up again. If anybody has any questions right now, I think, feel free to jump in, ask Stu questions. I'm asking questions, but you all can ask questions as well.
Yeah. So really, this was the bulk of the presentation. The rest is just meant to be a Q&A session. So yeah, I see. What are some ways to avoid ad fraud? Yeah. So that's a great question, and appreciate you bringing that up. So within any tool, there are going to be some basic levers and opportunities to look into kind of a benchmark for what is appropriate ad fraud. But there are third-party tools that most DSPs will partner with. So companies like DoubleVerify are some of the most important today and in the future. They're really taking a stance in identifying patterns that they're identifying patterns of what traditional ad fraud looks like. So if you're creating an ad fraud bot, right, it's pretty challenging to make that look like a human. You have it click every 1 second. It's a repeatable pattern. DoubleVerify will be proactive in ensuring that you don't buy those impressions and making sure that the impressions that you go to are only going towards real human traffic. So again, that's another qualifying question when you work with the DSP is which tools do you have in place, or do you partner with the third party? Because most of the time, you're not going to be able to just look at a spreadsheet of the data and see, oh, this was clearly fraud. It does require those third-party tools or the DSP having something aligned with that. So great question.
Let me ask you something, Stu. Say, for example, say I open an account with AdRoll, and then is my ad going to be advertised through every social media platform out there, or do I need to open myself each social media platform? Do I need to open a Pinterest in order for them to to spread my ad?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and definitely something that probably needs to be clarified, right? Because DSPs tend to be outside of the social networks. So DSPs tend to be more mobile web, display, video, and depending on your definition, native advertising. So the social networks tend to be closed walled gardens where you can only access them through their tools. So the DSP gives you an opportunity to buy media across your standard websites like the Seattle Times, Expedia, New York Times, Eater, the websites you tend to go to on a day-to-day basis that aren't social, right? Where you see those display ads or video rolls. Those are the ads where the DSPs are going to show up 9 out of 10 times. The social networks don't necessarily offer a DSP. They would require you to either use their ad tool or to sign a direct IO with them. So a DSP is outside of that ecosystem. So great question.
Now, if I were to compare, let's say, Google Ads to DSP, I mean, because Google's everywhere. So
right.
So what are the advantages of DSP?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and there's a few key differences. the key main difference with Google Ads is that you can only purchase Google products or ads that are on Google websites. So Google's reach on the internet is about 52% of the internet. So it's pretty massive, right? So for most advertisers, Google Ads is probably enough, but there are a lot of restrictions, right? Your data lives within Google's platforms. You can only buy on a CPC basis. Google has a lot of say on what can and cannot run, whether or not you agree with it. They could just pause it and that'd be the end of it. And it's a tool that, while powerful, like I said, only doesn't allow the same customization as a DSP. You can't generally onboard your CRM data with the same level of success. If you are looking to really scale and target your retargeting data or users who go to your website, again, you're going to miss out on a large portion because you're only hitting 52% of the active internet base. So for a lot of businesses, Google Ads will be sufficient, but it is those ones who are really looking to get the most out of their data and really looking to find an alternative to those the walled platforms of Google's, of Facebook's, and of just the Amazon platform, where a third-party DSP is going to be really valuable.
Do we have?
And I can also say,
we had some more questions in the chat. If I can just read them out to you.
Yeah, and I'll also just follow up with what Edward asked. It's also the ability to run different creative types. Google Ads is pretty limited to, obviously if you're going to run search, you have to run Google Ads. But if you're going to be running display on Google Ads, your ad formats are a little more limited in what's offered. And then if you're going to run video, it's just more limited. But if you're looking to run on just YouTube, right, it's a great solution.
That was probably a good segue because Aubrey asked any input on best practices for creative for the ads.
Yeah, this is going to be very advertiser specific, as a lot of this is, but making sure that the ads are viewable, they stand out from the web pages. You have a clear and concise call to action, and a border, right? Something simple as a border tends to increase click-through rate pretty significantly. And then just the color scheme that's consistent with your brand and matches the whole ad in general, but also strong imagery. You want your ad to stand out on a page. If somebody's reading a Bloomberg article, you need to catch their eye when they're scrolling through or when they land on that page. So making sure it's consistent, call to action, bright imagery, bright, colorful imagery, and just being something that's relative to your brand is kind of the top line, most important ones.
Mariah had a question. I'm curious, do you see the DSP landscape changing at all as a result of COVID-19?
Well, 2020 was obviously a challenging year. We did see ad spend drop fairly significantly, but according to Ad Exchanger, the growth with programmatic and DSP spending will continue to trend upwards. We're expected to see just about $100 billion of digital ads transacted through a DSP in 2022. That was about 65 billion in 2020. So, as that trends today, we're seeing about 88% of spend, of digital ad spend in the industry will be transacted programmatically through a DSP. I will say that the caveat is they're probably including Google Ads and Facebook Manager as a DSP there, because those two tend to be about 50% of ad spend combined. But I think the biggest changes that we've seen with COVID are really just the need for the need for more efficient ad buying, right? Every dollar counts. So we want to make sure that we're not advertising to people that aren't going to convert. So the option to, target a group of people and then cut off the 10% of waste of people who aren't converting, and making sure that we hit our audience and hit them when they're going to spend, right? The old marketing, who, what, when, where, why. The DSPs help you check off all of those by optimizing and targeting to the right person, the right time, the right place, and just getting really efficient with your buying.
Thanks. Candace just added a question to chat, and anytime I read out questions of chat, people can also unmute themselves if they want to add more to their question. But she asked, do you recommend ads beyond Google for search? Are there other places if you want to do search ads specifically beyond Google?
Yeah, obviously, yes and no, right? I mean, it's, if you're spending $500 to $1,000 a month, you're probably going to get more than enough reach on Google. If you're looking for a very, very, very niche audience, like, developers who work remotely on a Dell laptop and have a specific mouse, like, that gives you the ability to say, okay, well, I want to run on Yahoo, I want to run on Bing, but 90% of the time, Google's going to provide, in the search realm, more than enough scale. It's just very rarely does it require you to go to another search engine. Your budget will be suited more than well enough on Google.
And Candace had a follow-up question. She said, how do you see the new privacy laws and cookies affecting the ad space?
Yeah, dramatically. There's going to be so many changes over the next year or two. A lot of people suggest that the biggest change being third-party cookies going away is that we're going to shift from that one-to-one buying to more of like an audience cohort buying. So, instead of buying somebody, a unique individual, you'll target individual who's part of a larger audience. Well, I think that might be the short-term ramifications. I think that, we've been declining from third-party cookies for a long time. So I think Google's announcement that, they're getting rid of them in their browser is, I think it was made to be a bigger announcement than it really was. I think that, we're still going to have an emphasis on first-party retargeting data, CRM data, and businesses and brands just becoming more in control of their own data, I think will be the biggest change. I think that where in the past, only the Fortune 500 brands have had the ability and had the tools to manage their own data, I think that's going to be a more widespread opportunity in the next few years. And I think that's going to be the biggest shift of small businesses and small brands becoming the owners of their data and using that data in their ad campaigns, because that's still going to be something that's going to be part of the ecosystem. But with that, the cookie it's not the long-term solution. So I think there's going to be something that comes up in the next few years that changes it. Whether that be another unique identifier like the IDFA, whether it be Trade Desk's unique identifier, whether it be a graph that doesn't even exist yet. There will be a standard identifier that is in place on the internet. It just has to kind of jump out. My bet right now is on the Trade Desk's unique identifier being that tool. But I think that's still going to be a short-term solution to a much longer-term problem.
Great. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So if anyone has more questions, happy to have you just unmute yourself and ask, or pop them in chat. I think while we're waiting for more questions, I probably have a question. So Stu, can you just briefly explain what you do as a business? So you work with DSPs for clients and help them to get onto DSP platforms. Is that your primary business model?
Yeah, so my focus is in programmatic and working with DSPs for clients, but I also help with search, Amazon, basically any digital advertising needs. My recommendation for most businesses will always be to buy programmatically at some level, but ultimately, I like to consider what we do, the experts in digital advertising, fitted for your needs.
Great. Samuel asked a question while I asked mine, so that was great. He says, are there any high-level ways to measure ROI? Can you talk a little bit more about success metrics?
Yeah. So the easiest way is if you offer something on your website and you're trying to drive traffic onto your website, you can drop a pixel, basically just a small tracker on your website on the conversion page that tracks basic information like what was purchased and who purchased it. You can attribute that back to the campaign, and then as a result, you can get a very accurate measure of which ads drove volume, which ads made sales, which sales, what time of day those sales were built. So in the e-commerce platform, right, it's very easy and very attainable to get not even high level, but exact ROI, whether it's who saw your ad, who clicked on it, when they saw it, and how much they actually purchased. When it's offline, it tends to be a little bit more back napkin math. I have a current client right now who their website doesn't allow for any online transactions. It needs to be an in-call or an in-person visit. So they basically they were a business that didn't have a lot of customers coming to them. So it was a little easier in that any new business directed their way, whether it be through a call or a visit that wasn't brought to by one of their specialists, was likely the result of our campaign. Obviously, not every business is going to be that. So there are ways to back end napkin, like, referral codes, tracking codes, things like that. And basically just determining how much ad spend went into those different leads. But the long story short is that it is going to be different for every KPI and every business. So, we've had businesses even offer like discount codes that were only available through the ads and through online. So when they were redeemed in store, we knew that they saw the ad because they were able to print it or actually show the ad in person, right? And then we were able to calculate how much of an investment or how much of a return on the investment we got through that tactic, right? So every campaign should be built with an indicator of how we plan on measuring an ROI, because without it, right, we're just running a billboard and hoping people see it. So I would say, yeah, there's a bunch of ways to get creative, but it all really just depends on what your KPI is. If you're measuring online traffic, that's going to be the simplest way because you can drop an online pixel and track that information.
Great. Betsy had a question. She said, for a really small business getting started, what could be a potential budget? I think this probably leads back to the initial concept of the event, is that Facebook, you can do a $50 ad, you can do a $100 ad, and you feel like you've made some investment. So if someone's looking to move over, is that feasible with a really small budget?
Yeah. Generally, the best practice tends to be $1,000 per month. You can go a little bit lower if you're very targeted. So if you wanted to take that $1,000 and spend it in, Capitol Hill on weekdays after 5 p.m. before 11 p.m., that budget can go a lot further than trying to target, young males in the United States, right? If you're trying to target that, $1,000 isn't going to be enough budget. So, and I will say it is pretty much dependent on the business and what you are looking to accomplish. But general best practice, out $1,000 per month with some flexibility. 3 months campaigns tend to be best practice because it gives you enough time to optimize, it gives you enough time to make changes, and it gives you enough time to realize the full attribution window of a given ad. So with $3,000 in a 3-month period, that gives you a very good barrier to entry that's going to give you a couple of different options for the creative type, the creative sizes, the sites that you're running on, and the different tactics that you can use.
Great. Anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
I have a couple, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Roy.
Okay, one thing is negative keywords. I make Christmas cards, been doing it for a number of years, and sell them both on Amazon and on my own website. And I think a lot of it's going to the wrong people. And I'm selling these nationally, the cards. And so I think I need to know better how to do the negative keywords. And I don't know if you can do that much with Google on doing that. I've advertised on Google for a long time, but I haven't spent, one time the thing ballooned way up and I got virtually nothing for the ad doing it. The other thing is I have a list of people that have bought cards from Amazon from me, but I don't have their email. I've got their addresses, but no email. And how do I contact them more? Do I send them direct mail? Or is there another way to go out and get the emails easily?
Yeah. So again, that is probably one of the biggest negatives when you are running on a Facebook or an Amazon, is that you don't own and you don't control the data, right? They own that data, so you don't have access to it. But really, with a DSP, you could get super targeted to users who are interested in your product, with the negative keywords of keywords that you've seen that aren't transacting. The ability to offer CRM data. Generally, if you have a list of at least 100 users, you can start to build an audience pool. Addresses tend to be a popular transition because you can take those addresses and you can find those users online and target them specifically with some confidence, right? Again, that goes into probabilistic data where you're probably hitting those users. But if you're talking Google search specifically, I'd be happy to talk offline in another session, because there are a bunch of best practices and opportunities to ensure that you're using negative keywords, setting budget limits, setting CPMs, targeting specific keywords that are driving business. So a lot of the same optimizations and a lot of the same tools that Google search offers, you can use in a programmatic landscape. And I would say, like you mentioned, that you're buying nationally, depending on the audience.
Yeah.
Right.
nationally, yes.
Right. So like I would say, depending on the budget that you're, offering, it might make sense to say, hey, like, let's only advertise to Chicago and test what works there on a very small scale basis, make sure it works before you bring that scale out more. So really, the biggest thing is with a DSP, just the same way you can with Google, you can offer negative keywords to ensure that you're staying away from specific topics or staying away from specific sites. But without seeing any of your setup or anything, it's tough to say, exactly what the best practices might be for your business. So, definitely reach out, and I'd love to talk more.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask before we wrap it up here today?
Perfect. So I'll just say, kind of wrap it up, thank you everyone for attending. Really, the purpose of today was really just to give you an introduction of the options that exist beyond going to a site specifically. Programmatic advertising is a quickly growing ecosystem within the advertising world. And, if I was a bettor, I would say that in 10 years, this is going to be the only way to buy at some level. So if you're not familiar with it yet, get familiar with it long term. It's going to be important to your business, and it will come up. I would imagine that the more research you guys do, the more you'll hear about it. But I'm always here as a resource to help. So please do reach out, and looking forward to working with you guys.
Thanks so much, Stu. So we'll also follow up with a recording of this session and links to some of the different platforms we talked about, as well as Stu's details and contact information. So we'll be sending that out. Hopefully I can pull that all together by Friday and get it out to everyone. So thank you everyone for attending today, and that's a wrap.
Yeah, and thank you, Andrea, for helping put this together.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.